If you got to a stage in life where you were able to consider turning your hobby into a profession, how would you go about it? And what planning approach would you take to help it be successful? We'll hear a great example of that today. Welcome to Half Hour Mentor. It's Ian Cleverden here, and welcome to my podcast series designed to help anyone who is looking for inspiration to develop their creative skills, whether professionally or as a hobbyist. For this series, our focus is the creative arts. I'm interviewing musicians, songwriters, authors, actors, and also speaking to some in the directing and strategic management fields of this wide-ranging industry. All of my guests have been carefully chosen, as each one of them has a very interesting backstory from which we can all learn. If you're new to the series, please follow it on whichever streaming platform you use and go back to have a listen to the rich archive of over 30 interviews and compilations. Now, I've been making a habit recently of having interviews spread over 2 episodes because there's been so much great advice shared by my guest mentors, and today's guest is no exception. John Watterson is known for 2 main roles in the creative arts. He's the programme director for a number of music festivals run by a company called Harmony Voyages, and is perhaps more widely known as Fake Thackeray, the artist who keeps alive the wonderful material of the much-missed songwriter and storyteller, the late Jake Thackeray. However, before starting both of these artistic careers, John spent many years working as a senior manager for a laundry firm. In this first episode, John shares with us his career journey and how he turned his love of Jake Thackeray's work into a successful performing career around the UK. In the next episode, John will share his advice on how to plan a concert series or festival programme. This series is completely ad-free and independent of sponsorship. So, if you'd like to sponsor the series, or just throw in a few virtual pennies into the bowl to keep us going in green tea and digestives, please feel free to do so by donating online via the link in the show notes. And thank you in advance if you do. And so to the interview. I sat down with John recently at his home in Yorkshire. John Watterson, welcome to Half Hour Mentor.
Thank you very much.
I want to start with a question I ask all my guests, is that looking back to your teenage years, all that time ago, you might say.
Yes.
Yeah. What was the first job or career that you wanted to pursue, and why?
That's an interesting one. There was never any ambition for a particular job. I was one of 4 children brought up by a widowed mother on benefits on the Isle of Man, which is where I grew up. And so the focus really, childhood and teenage years, was all about doing well at school. That was mum's push. That was what sort of drove her. Right. Very intelligent woman, but not of the generation that ever got to university. And I was the first of the next generation down to be able to go to university. So that was the ambition, to do well at school and go on to university. There was never a particular want to be a train driver or an astronaut. There was never a specific ambition.
Right. So what was your path then? Did you get to university?
Got to university. I took maths, physics and German A-level. And that was discouraged at school because in those days you were either supposed to be arts or science. And so to have somebody who was doing maths, physics, and then a modern language, as it's called, that was frowned on, and I was discouraged. But again, my mother said, no, if that's what you're good at and that's what you want to do that. And they were the 3 subjects I was interested in, and got the necessary grades in those to go on to university. Again, there was no driving, I want to be this when I grow up. So the course that appealed most was a business course. So I did business administration and German at university to keep the language going because I enjoyed that.
Great. What was the first job you went into then, post-university?
Yeah, post-university. It was a sort of bit of accidental stumble. I'd written a number of generic application letters. You know, the dear sir, I'd love to work for your company, blah, 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 yeah, from university. And I had a stack of these. This was obviously in the days before word processors. And so I had these were handwritten. I had met Carol, who was to become my wife and still is, at university. And we were living in Stoke-on-Trent doing a bit of a sort of part-time job there. And she posted off a letter to an advert she'd seen in the Telegraph. To a company called Spring Grove, never heard of them, but went down to do the interview, and wasn't the easy to prepare or research a company. I mean, now you just go onto Google, put in the company's name, you just get loads of information. In those days, pre-internet and pre-all that, it was very difficult. So I went down for this interview down Henley-on-Thames, very ill-prepared, not really sure what the company did, but had a lovely, relaxed interview conversation with the personnel director there, and got onto their management training scheme. So it was a bit of a stumble. They were an industrial services and laundry company. And I hit lucky because they had a really good management training program that allowed you to look at customer service and sales and production. And you spent 6 months in each of these things, and then you decided which direction you wanted to go in.
Right.
And I really thrived in that. I enjoyed the structure of a management course, and progressed through the ranks, through the various levels of the company, from junior manager to general manager to regional director, and they were an excellent company to work for.
So how long did you work for them for?
I worked for them for about 10 years, and then they were subject to a series of takeovers. It was a profitable company, very good at generating cash, and therefore they were taken over by different parent companies. We had P&O, part of the P&O group. For no particular reason, we didn't do the laundry for the boats or anything, but we were just good at generating cash and profits. And after that, the whole thing started to become less fun. It was then all about profit maximisation, and penny pinching is probably not the right way of putting it, but it became less about how do you produce a great product and service for a customer, as opposed to how can you screw the last percentage out of either your customer, if you can't do that anymore, out of your employees, and just all became a bit more cynical and a bit less enjoyable as a career. But I had 2 kids and a mortgage, and therefore I stuck at it, as people do.
I'm sensing that probably was going against your moral beliefs to a certain degree.
It was partly that, and partly that the culture of the company changed from one which was very supportive and creative, and if you had an idea, run with it, and went from that to a very top-down structure where the person above you in the organisation was always right. And you always had to do what they said. It was much more a corporate, do as you're told thing, which doesn't really suit me at all. But then, as I say, you do what you need to do because you have responsibilities at that age. Absolutely.
So you're known for 2 things, certainly from my point of view. You are Fake Thackeray, sort of the leading tribute to Jake Thackeray, and we'll obviously talk about that in a moment. And also, you look after some programme management for festivals.
Yes.
With Harmony Voyages.
That's right.
Which I was, I had my first experience of that a few months ago with the Costa Festival in Ibiza, which was fantastic, and so much so I've booked again for next year. But I want to delve into those because how did you go from doing your full-time role, and you're in a profit-making organisation, and how did you sort of fit in the music side of things? Let's talk about the Fake Thackeray side.
Thackeray side. I didn't really. The 2 things weren't really concurrent. I used to enjoy playing the guitar and doing what they call floor spots at folk clubs and things. But whilst I was working, the idea of doing anything in music more than that just hadn't occurred to me. And so the very fortunate thing that happened to me was I was made redundant, which at the time was not fortunate at all. It was a complete disaster. Still had financial responsibilities, still had kids at an independent school, still had a mortgage. Carol was working, but we needed both wages. And so being made redundant was sort of the end of my world, really. It was... I couldn't really understand how this organisation that needed me for 20 years, all of a sudden, within 24 hours, could decide, no, don't need you anymore. you become from essential to surplus to requirements overnight. And that really, really hit me very hard. And I had to sort of mentally regroup from that. And I talked to 3 or 4 people in your life whose opinions you really, really trust. And I talked to those, and I said, look, this is what's happened. I'm sort of a little bit of a fish out of water, not sure what to do. And And I found that process useful. I mean, the book I was reading at the time called it Networking, which, is a thing. I sort of called it talking to my contacts and talking to the people I trust. And out of that came a process whereby I got another job, and I'd set myself a target that I was going to get a better paid job than the previous one, just sort of, just for spite. I thought, no, I'm not going to take the first thing that comes along. I've been guarded against that. Don't just jump in because you've got a mortgage. So I held back from that, and I got a job with a 25% pay increase, and I was already paid really well. So I'd sort of worked through with my contact an approach to do that, and that was successful. And that worked for about 3 years. So again, nothing in the music yet. But I was 3 years away from home. I was in the Thames Valley, working 4 or 5 nights away from home, and that lasted for 3.5 years, which was about 3 years more than I expected. But at that time, that was around the time Jake Thackeray died, that 2002. And
had you been a big fan of him?
Yeah, I'd been a fan. I'd seen him at our folk club in the Isle of Man as a teenager. That was sort of go back to those years for a little bit. It was when I look back on it, it was a very, very formative thing, this folk club, because the chap who set it up would bring over really entertaining, funny people. His idea of folk music was really entertaining and comedy, as opposed to a traditional folk. So he would bring over people like Mike Harding, Jasper Carrott, Bernard Wrigley, Tony Capstick, and Jake Thackeray. And we'd go, and I remember thinking, I was in absolute awe of somebody that could walk into a room full of strangers with a guitar and entertain them for 2 hours without notes and music stands and bits of paper. And I thought this was just fantastic. Anyway, move back forward now to 2002 when Jake died. And I'm away from home for 4 nights a week. And I thought, rather than just go to the pub every night, and I'm going to try and learn each week a Jake Thackeray song. Because I'd realised after he died, there's a huge amount in his catalogue that I didn't even realise was there. And I thought, right, I'm going to try and learn a Jake Thackeray song each week. And I'm going to go down to Maidenhead Folk Club, and Maidenhead was where the company was. I'm going to go to Maidenhead Folk Club, and I'm going to inflict this song on them. They were a traditional folk club, but lovely, lovely people. And here's John again with his Jake Thackeray song. Thank you very much. And I'd go along each week, because you only know that you know a song when you do it in public. You can play it in your bedroom, but you only know you know it. So that was my thing that I did for many weeks. I'd learn a song and go down to Maidenhead Folk Club. And then when that job came to an end, I went back to my contact, my networking, talking to the people whose opinion I trust. Had more conversations, and what came out of those conversations was, what is it you want to do now? You're mid-50s. What do you want to do as opposed to what you had to do? The financial obligations were coming to an end. I'd done a couple of charity Jake Thackeray evenings, and they'd gone down extremely well. And I thought, well, actually, what I want to do is that. What I want to do is go back to my teenage years, to that folk club, when these people came in with a guitar and just entertained for 2 hours. If you ask me, what do I want to do? That's what I want to do.
So just on that point then, the financial side wasn't as much of a challenge?
It was still a challenge, but it wasn't critical. By that stage, my second son was through university. The mortgage wasn't paid off, but it wasn't massive. Carol was working, she's an educational psychologist. She had a senior job there. So we could survive, without the foreign holidays and stuff, but we could live and keep the house, and the kids were through school and university. Yeah. So it was less of a pressure, but it was still a very significant impact on the household income to go from a well-paid job to, I've got a good idea, why don't I do a job that earns me absolutely nothing for the first year or so, and maybe nothing at all in the future, or maybe leads to something. What do you think of that as an idea? And Carol didn't quite say, you must be mad. That was certainly the look in her eyes. But we talked it through as much as we could. I mean, it was a ridiculous idea. And so I don't know how you talk through a ridiculous idea, but I said, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to and then, I mean, supportive as she has been for 40 years, she said, well, okay, if that's what you want to do, then let's do that. But, put a plan together.
Yeah.
Don't just, so I put a plan together. I had to put together, using the sort of business brain, how are you going to make this transition then from somebody who's in a corporate structure, who's pretty much told what to do each day and the objectives they've got, to this very open, okay, I want to play the guitar and sing some song. How do you go from there to there?
What was the biggest challenge that you faced in those first stages?
Well, I knew the material, Jake's material, was solid gold. So I had that advantage. If I'd been starting off with the songs written by John Watterson, of which there are not many, but if I'd started off trying to make a name as me in the sort of folky world and the music industry, absolutely no chance. But I had the rock solid material of Jake Thackeray to start with.
And was there anybody else doing the tribute?
I do have some friends, and we meet up. We are all Jake Thackeray nerds and anoraks, and we get together to do it as a group of, we call ourselves, train spotters and stamp collectors. we are Thackerayites, and we get together and do it for fun. But there's nobody actually out there trying to charge people good money to come and listen to it. Nobody was doing that. I thought, well, okay, if I'm starting off a business here, let's put the business brain to it. And I went to a sort of cliche marketing mix thing that's used in business, which is the 4 Ps: the product, the place, the promotion, and the price. Okay. Product, the material is great. If I could make a decent fist of it, I've got a product which should sell. Price, well, I can do it for nothing in the early days until somebody comes along. So how do you promote this and the place? And so my two main strategies that came out of that were, first of all, I would go to any folk club in the country, ideally somewhere that's not more than a couple of hours drive away, but if it was worth it, I would do it. And most folk clubs do something called a singer's night. Mm-hmm. So you go along and you do your 2 songs. So I would drive to Birmingham, a couple of hours, to a folk club. You're then waiting for a couple of hours while things happen. You play your 2 songs. You come home again. It's a sort of 8-hour round trip.
Full day, basically.
A full day to sing 2 songs at a folk club, which may or may not get listened to by somebody of any interest at all. And I did that for about a year. So there's a lot of petrol and a lot of time going out to these places to say, I'm doing this. Here's these songs. To build up some market awareness, back to the business terms. And the other thing I decided to do was to set up my own village hall concerts. So we got a lovely little village hall here in Poppleton, and we set up something called Poppleton Live. Because one of the things I wanted to do was to be able to support bigger names.
Right.
Everybody wants to do that. You're starting off in music, we'd all like to be on the same bill as the Rolling Stones or whatever genre of music you do. And so there's a huge amount of competition. So what I thought I'd do, okay, I will invite these bigger names to play in our village hall. Mm-hmm. I think I've got enough contacts around the village just to get people to buy a ticket and come along to the first few and see how it is. So I'm going to make it a really good night. Yeah. We're going to put on, this person going to put on sort of Vin Garbett or Jeslo or various people in the folk world. And I'm going to put them on, and I decide who the support act is going to be. And guess what? For the first few, it's going to be me. It's going to be me. And then I can say on my music CV, on my website, supported Vin Garbett, supported so-and-so, supported so-and-so. And it's all perfectly true. And by doing that, you then get to know these people because you book them with your promoter's hat on.
Yeah, you're building that network.
Yeah, and it's back to networking. It is really back to networking. So the two real strands of trying to get into the music was a lot of graft, going out and doing stuff for nothing in order to try and get noticed. Yeah. And just applying this, okay, what's the product? How can I promote it? What's the place? What's the price? And just constantly thinking of how do I get the word out there? And really, really dispiriting in the early days because you go somewhere, you've driven a long way, you do 2 fantastic Jake Thackeray songs and you do them to the best of your ability, and you think it's great, and then nothing comes of it. And so you do it again, and you do it again. And where I was going to say I hit lucky. It's that cliche that if you work hard enough, you make your own luck. Where I hit lucky, I went to a little folk club down in Rotherham, and there was a chap there called Anthony John Clark, who's become a very good friend since. And he was doing a little mini festival in a couple of weeks' time, and his support act had dropped out. I said, would you like to come and do the support? So now you're in front of 600-700 people, you buy invitation, you've got your own set. Yeah. Fantastic. So not only were there some people in that audience that thought, oh, this Jake Thackeray stuff's okay, but also Anthony has contacts with Fairport Convention and various other people. So within a year and 18 months of just going around and doing these songs and getting nothing, did this one, met Anthony John Clark. Within a month of that meeting, I got a call from Dave Pegg from Fairport Convention saying, oh, yeah, I used to like Jake Thackeray. He was a mate of the band. Anthony John says you do a really good job of it. Do you want to come and do our winter tour with us? And so I went from all that graft to, bang, you're now supporting Fairport Convention on a 6-week tour around the UK. Fantastic. And you cannot believe how that felt.
So what was the timescale between you starting to do the tours around the folk clubs and to actually doing the Fairport support?
About 2.5, 3 years.
Right.
Yeah, so from scratch, very, very little happened for about 2 years, and then you got the call, and then doing the Fairport thing, and I thought, there's something. There was a sort of validation in it. You thought, yeah, okay, this is something. Yeah. This is something. It's not just me that thinks Jake's songs are great. Someone else out there has gone, hey, that's okay. And that all of a sudden, after about 2 years of sort of knocking it not against a brick wall, but putting all that groundwork in, and a couple of years, somebody else goes, yeah, that works. Yeah, you can come and do that for us, sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, it was lucky, but I had put an awful lot of work into it, and I think if you do that, then the cliche of making your own luck is true.
Absolutely, and that led to umpteen festivals, many things that you've done.
Yeah, festivals and folk clubs and village halls. Yeah, I haven't actually counted, but there must be something like 500 to 600 gigs now that I've done, and. It's a little hobby that I thought would if it worked, it would last a couple of years, and then those people who remember Jake Thackeray would have listened to him and they're going, okay, that's great, we've heard that. Yeah. And yet 10 years later, it's still great. I'm still getting bookings and still absolutely enjoying it.
Well, before we met at the festival, I saw you supporting Jasper Carrott in his Liverpool gig. And I think the thing that stands out to me is there's two things there. You've obviously got fantastic material from Jake himself to work with, but it's not going to work if you don't put it across in such a humorous way. And you put your own stamp on it. It's not that you are pretending to be Jake Thackeray. You do it in your own way. But so you interpret the material.
That's interesting because that I mean it's nice of you to say, and interesting. That was a very deliberate part of when I was defining the product, when I was doing my marketing thinking. I thought I do not want to be what's called a tribute act, where you try and look like, dress like, and talk like. I mean, the Bootleg Beatles, bless them, are a fantastic tribute act, but they're in character all the time, and they are John and Paul and George and Ringo.
You wouldn't recognise them walking down the road.
And they're fantastic at doing that. I thought, no, I don't want to do that. What I want to do is present Jake's songs, but I don't want people to be judging the quality of some sort of impression. Inevitably, because I've practiced his songs listening to him on CD do them a million times, inevitably you pick up the intonation and it starts to sound like a bit of an impersonation, and that's not what's intended. What's intended is getting his timing right, getting all the intonations right, but doing it in my way. And then between songs, I don't try to be Jake Thackeray talking between songs. I talk about the man. I've now had the had eight years researching and writing the biography on Jake Thackeray. So I've got a massive material that I can draw on to tell anecdotes, stuff people haven't heard. If you're a Jake Thackeray fan, you come along to a show, you hear the song, but you also get little snippets about the man and his life and his work that you sort of can't get anywhere else. It's not just song after song after song. And that's what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be, corny, but a celebration, my interpretation of Jake's songs, along with the talking bits. And in the talking bits, I can be me then. I can say what I like. I can talk about Jake. I can talk about the song. I can tell some sort of anecdote of my own. And that's where I can play and do my own creativity, if you like.
And that very much comes across. I think also, didn't you perform in front of his family?
Yes. Well? Yeah, I have a few times now. Jake's three sons they're private people, they're lovely people. I've got to know them a little bit, but they're very, very private and don't want to be sort of identified as the son of somebody famous, therefore you're sort of famous by default. They very much sort of stay in the background and stuff. So if they come to a gig, I would never say, oh, there's so-and-so over there. But it is a joy to have one of them in one, or in one case, three of them in the audience, because they'll take the mickey out of me something terrible afterwards, and they will tell me all the stuff I get wrong, and it's joyous, joyous to have them there. Scary because I remember when one of the sons was in the audience. There was this very complicated thing going on in my head where I'm singing a Jake Thackeray song. The audience are listening to me sing the song, but there's a son of Jake Thackeray watching the audience reaction to me singing a Jake Thackeray song. And there's all that going through my head while I'm trying to remember all these words. No, just focus on the words,
Different parts of your brain going, juggling around.
But it is a joy, and they were extremely generous with the material to write the biography and lovely, lovely people.
There's probably quite a few people listening to this now, John, that perhaps... with the greatest respect, a little bit in later life, you get towards the end of your career, they've been musicians, they've had something, and they think, I'd really like to make that into more than just a hobby. Having learnt what you've done, and you've been there and done it, and again, those 2 years, probably the doubts were cropping in, thinking, is this going to, from what you've said? What advice would you give somebody who's in that position and think, I don't know, mid-late 50s, got the opportunity to develop their career as a musician? What advice would you give them?
I guess, and I get a lot of musicians now with my other hat on approaching me. Is your product strong enough? Is what you do something that you could imagine 100 people paying 15 quid to come along to a venue and listen to? As I say, I had the advantage. I cheat. I stand on the shoulders of a giant and do that. But for people who are maybe doing their own stuff, I think that's a fiendishly difficult hurdle to get over. Without getting into the management speak. What's your unique selling point? Mine is Jake Thackeray, and that's what I sell. Yeah. So somebody who wanting to get in and make a living out of music, I think it's fiendishly difficult if you haven't got something that people will go, wow, that's different. Having said that, if what somebody wanted to do was get into it as a paying hobby, as opposed to making a living out of it, which I think is fiendishly difficult, I could only suggest doing what I do, which is, put the hours in, just get out there, make yourself known, but go for it. You only get one shot at this. You only get one go. So, if you think you've got something which some people ought to be listening to, and you think you've got the right to get on a stage in front of people, get out there somewhere to open mics, to folk clubs, to whatever, put yourself out and about and talk to people and be prepared to take criticism. I've never been afraid of asking. I always ask for advice. When I got made redundant, I would go to people. I would always ask for advice. And in my own head, I think, but I reserve the right to ignore all of this. I don't have to take any of it.
Choose your trusted advisors.
But and take advice and take criticism. But I do think trying to make a living out of music, whether you're young or in later life, is fiendishly difficult unless you've got some sort of some factor X factor, something that somebody would look at on YouTube and go, "Hey, that's interesting," And so, but I don't know. Is that advice? Is that rambling? No idea.
But you mentioned 4 Ps before. Just remind us what those are for
the product.
People don't know.
So is the product strong enough? Promotion. Where are you going to promote it? How are you going to let people know what you do?
Yeah.
The place, where are you going to do that? Are you going to start something off in your local village and bring people on? Are you going to get out in your car and drive a million miles to get somewhere? And price, are you prepared? Where do you think it should be priced when you're starting off? Mm-hmm. Where do you think it should be priced once you've established it? Can you see yourself, charging 15 quid a head to 100 people to come and listen to you?
Yeah.
So, product, promotion, place, and the other one. Yeah.
What most resonated with me in that part of the discussion was that if you've had a career working full-time in an organisation and have the opportunity, be it financial or time-related, to develop your hobby into a small business career, 2 things. A, do it, because we only have one shot of this in life. And B, don't underestimate the variety of skills that you've learnt in business that can help you plan out your approach. However, careful business planning is key. John's use of the 4 Ps of marketing, product, price, place and promotion was great to see, and it's one of the many models out there that can help you define your definition of success. If, for example, you decided to become a performing musician, what would your unique selling point or USP be? That's what promoters would want to hear from you and be able to identify in your work. There's a lot of support available online and in various self-help books to help you plan your approach to this. It was also really interesting to hear how John developed his love of Jake Thackeray's work, and especially how his nerve-wracking performances in front of Jake's family earned their respect to the degree that they trusted him with personal material that would help him write Jake's biography. A link to John's site, fakethackeray.com, is in the show notes if you'd like to find out more. Make sure you subscribe to or follow the series wherever you get your pods to be notified of the next episode if you haven't done that already. And in that episode, John takes us through his role as a programme director for music festivals. If you've ever wondered how programming a festival works, or perhaps even fancy having a go at putting on your own local concert series, then don't miss the next episode. I shall also be revealing some very special news of my own, having listened to a lot of the advice from my guests in this series. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. Until the next episode, bye for now.